Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading to the middle of nowhere for horrors from the most remotest parts. I'd also like to remind you that we are nearly there for our competition. Just a few more people to follow me on Twitter and we'll hit that magic 3,000. So go on, follow me over there. It'll be good. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I dog sit for a family friend. They much prefer to have someone stay at their house with the dogs. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere, and I love the countryside. So for me, this is like a staycation, because I live in the city now and never have any time to myself. The house is in the middle of nowhere. When I say nowhere, I mean this place takes 2 hours to get to from work and is about 45 minutes to the nearest town or interstate. There is one neighbor within 5 miles and he lives directly across the street. I'm used to this where I'm from. It's supposed to give you the space you need, but also help you feel safer, knowing you have at least one person nearby. However, this guy has done nothing but make me feel unsafe as hell. So I get to Terry and John's house, and they're telling me the drill, when to feed the dogs, 2 super cute and spoiled Australian cattle dogs, and water the plants and stuff. Then as they're loading up their stuff to take to the car, Terry says, "Oh, don't forget to tell her about Steve." John says, "Oh yeah, don't worry about the neighbor across the street. He's harmless. The guy drinks a lot and is a little off, but totally harmless. Hell, the guy has lost his license so many times, all he can do is drive a moped round to get to town." However, just in case, this is where we keep our firearm. Steve has 3 "Don't Tread on Me" Confederate flags, and 2 plain Confederate flags, all of which are hanging from his porch. Of course, he's a little weird. Then he takes me to where the weapon is located and explains that it's loaded, and if I were to use it I don't need to cock it, just pull the trigger extra hard. At this point I'm like, whatever, you keep that in your house when it takes police at least 45 minutes to get here. Still, I've got no worries, I'm used to drunk weirdos. I know how to handle them. I love this life in the middle of nowhere. And I've gotten 2 protective dogs that will always attack on a 1-word command, so I feel quite safe. Terry and John leave around 3 p.m. I took the dogs for a walk and play some frisbee, and begin to unload my stuff while they're still worn out from all the running. As I come back for my second load of stuff, as I'm staying there for a week, I needed work clothes and my Xbox to keep me entertained in the late evenings, I hear their neighbor Steve slam on his door, seemingly having a phone conversation. I first just heard his voice faintly. Then he started yelling, asking where they went. The dogs are just hearing him now and starting to growl softly. I tell the dogs to calm down. "It's all right," I say. "Just Steve, remember? He probably wants some privacy. Let's go inside." As I grab my stuff, I hear him yell again, "I do care about my kids." And then I hear him throw something on the unpaved road behind me. Turns out it was his cell phone. As I'm grabbing my stuff, the dog starts going crazy and runs a few feet behind me, barking and growling viciously. I drop my stuff, turn around and see the neighbor at the end of the driveway just staring at me. I yell at the dogs to calm down and get back to my side. They do, and then I gave Steve a friendly wave. In my head I'm thinking, this is kind of weird, but he's probably been drinking. Plus they said the guy's harmless, and I've dog sat before and never had a problem with neighbors. He then takes a single step towards me and says in a manipulative sounding voice, "You alright?" Steve is wearing dirty jeans, work boots, and a dirty red hoodie, and a red hat with the Confederate flag on it. He's also got brown dirty hair to his shoulders and a beard that's probably 5 inches long. Yeah, I'm pretty good. My name's Pip. Just dog sitting for Johnny and Terry this week. I'm ready to get them all in for the evening. I look down at the dogs to see their reaction. They look like they're just about to attack, and I've never seen them like this before. How about yourself? We sat in silence for about 30 seconds before he stated, I'm asking if you're alright. I'm Steve. Nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks for being a good neighbor and checking on me, but like I said, I'm good. Are you alright? This time, the silence lasts for probably a whole minute, and I figure he's wasted. I should just get inside with my stuff. So I turn around, finish grabbing my things, and as I do, I hear him take one more step on the gravel driveway. The dogs bark again. I turn around and Steve says, I know them. Them dogs won't do nothing to me. They're some damn good dogs, that's for sure. I begin feeling super uneasy, so I close my trunk and turn around to see if he's gonna say anything else. I was about to tell him that I was gonna go inside, and then instead awkwardly said, Yeah, what? He yelled. I'm shocked and say, Yeah, I'm going inside now. Thanks for checking, Steve. I'm fine. I've got the dogs this week. Have a good night. I turn and go, and the dogs follow me with no problem. Steve continues to stand where I left him for 10 minutes, just staring at the house. Note, this house does not have a front door. There's a side door and a back door. The back door is the main door because the front door of the house has those big green, fluffy privacy trees, so I can't even see his house through the front window. You can't see either doors from the street. You have to come onto the property to see them. It's about 6 o'clock, and where I'm at, the sun starts going down around that time, but doesn't actually get dark until 9:15 p.m. during the summer. The dogs and I are on the couch, and I've got my gaming headphones on while playing R2-D2 online. All of a sudden, the dogs flip, running towards the back door and barking and growling. What the hell? They don't do this unless someone pulls up in their car, and they don't know who it is. But I'm not having anyone over. I grab my knife, which is always located nearby, and start walking towards the back door. The dogs are still going crazy, and I have no idea what they're looking at. I don't see anything. But then, I look closer. I see moped trail lights in the driveway, seemingly hiding behind my car. I then try and focus in and see that Steve is turning around, staring at the back of his house from his moped, ducking behind my car. I get the dogs to be quiet, and I hide to see what he's doing. The dogs are still growling, but at least they're not giving away my location right now. I was watching him for 5 minutes. Just a creepy stare in my general direction. I don't think that he can see me, but I'm unsure. He then shuts off his moped and crouches down next to my car, where I can see him now peeking into it. When I lived in the country, you see, I didn't ever lock my doors, not for my house, not my car or anything. Since I work and live downtown, naturally I keep all of my doors locked at all times. I didn't see him try and get into it, but he walks around it a few times. He's not crouching anymore. Obviously he feels like no one's watching him, or he doesn't care. He just is looking into my car, and is only taking a single step, stopping, looking in my car, then at the house, and repeat. It's creepy as hell. At this point I text Terry and tell her that Steve is doing some really weird stuff and that I'm feeling super uncomfortable. I get a text back saying, call the cops if you feel unsafe. They know him. They can come and talk to him. Remind me to tell you about the time he was standing out at the street at 6 a.m. when I was leaving for work when we get back. We think he's had a psychotic break. How comforting, right? So I talk myself down. This guy is just wasted. However, if he starts getting close to the door, I'm calling the cops. Bad idea looking back, because the cops take so long to get out there. I'm watching him as he's made his second round looking into my car. He then gets on his moped and drives off. As he passes the window that faces the driveway, he sped up, trying to make it so that I wouldn't see him if I were just watching TV. Now it's about 8 p.m. and the dogs start going crazy again. I look out, and now his moped is parked in plain view, and he's standing on the walkway just 30 feet from the house, staring and talking to himself. Now it's like 8 p.m. and the dogs start going crazy again. I look out, and now his moped is parked in plain view, and he's standing on the walkway just 30 feet from the house, staring and talking to himself. I had previously turned all the lights off so that he couldn't easily see in and see what I was doing. I see him take a single step towards the door, now 29 feet away. I grab the firearm. I've calmed the dogs down and they are in full-on protective mode. One dog to my left and one to my right. It's now 8:15 p.m. and I call the cops. I explain the situation and that the owners think he had a psychotic breakdown. As I'm halfway through explaining why I'm starting to fear for my safety, the operator says, "Ma'am, what's your address again?" I tell her, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not located in our county. I'll have to transfer you to Chal County." "Are you serious? The owner said that the cops in South Spoon know him very well and know how to handle him. Isn't that you guys?" "Yes, ma'am, that is us, but you are located in a different county. That's not our jurisdiction. The guy who is bothering me lives in your county. That is why I'm calling you." The operator then transfers me to another county. When she answers the phone with the average, "911, what's your emergency?" I'm silent. I'm looking out the kitchen window and Steve has come up about 4 to 5 feet since the last time I looked out there. "911, what's your emergency?" I then explain what's happening and explain that I was transferred because I'm apparently not in their jurisdiction. She tells me to remain calm, to turn all the lights on, and I said screw that. The guy's waiting for me to do something like that. The doors are locked and I have a firearm. If he enters, I will shoot. She then tells me that it's safest with the lights on. I turn on the lights, he notices, and gets on his moped and drives back to his house. I tell her what happened. She asks if I would still like to have an officer come out. Hell yes, I want one to come out. Apparently the cops in the neighboring jurisdiction know him, but the lady transferred me to you. This is the 3rd time he's come onto the property, and he's getting closer and closer to the door. I do not feel safe. Someone that is not me needs to talk to this guy. Calm down, ma'am. We'll send someone. However, based on your location, it may take a while for someone to get out there. That's fine, I say. Just please, have someone out here as quickly as you can. I ask her if she would stay on the line until he got here, and she says that one's on their way, but she needs to be available if someone else calls in. She told me that if he comes back and I'm uneasy, to call them without hesitation. By this point it's now 9. The sun is getting ready to set completely. Again the dogs go crazy, and now I'm getting really pissed off from walking around the house with a loaded weapon, so that if Steve sees me, he'll see the firearm as well. I look out the window and see his moped, but I don't see him. Where is he? From the window in the kitchen, I can't see the back door, so I go upstairs with one dog following. The other is too old to climb the stairs and peek through the window. Steve is on the back porch, lighting matches and throwing them down onto the wooden porch. He doesn't seem harmless anymore. He's talking to himself and twisting his head back and forth like he's getting warmed up for a fight or having a conversation with another one of his personalities. I start filming him from the upstairs window just in case, so that I can hide my phone and, when they found it, they know who they'd be looking for. The sun is down and it starts to get dark. He steps up the door and begins to knock. He then starts pounding on the door, and I'm pretty good at staying calm in this situation, but my heart is beating so fast my Fitbit had to change my heart rate tab every 2 seconds. If he gets in here, I'm going to have to use this firearm. I could see pure hate in his eyes. He then stops pounding at the door, quickly turns away and runs to his moped, starts it, and takes off faster than I thought the moped could go. Not a minute later, the cop pulls into the driveway. I had mentioned to the dispatch operator that I have 2 dogs who will bark at the officer but will not attack unless given a specific word. They are trained and that I have a firearm, that I will leave when I go meet the officer. I met the officer, the dogs didn't growl, and simply gave a single bark apiece to let me know that someone was there. I went outside to meet him and told him the guy just took off moments ago on the moped. Oh yeah, I think I passed him when I turned onto the road. I explained that he is either drunk or crazy, and if he sees him on his way back, he should definitely pull him over because I'm quite positive he's under the influence of something. Normal people don't just act that way. The cop basically shrugs everything off and says, "Well, are you going to stay here the night?" I told him no. I leave the dogs overnight and come back in the morning. I asked him to stay while I packed everything up, and he nodded. I go inside, give the dogs love and treats, and crate them for the night, and take off and return the next day with my dad. My dad begins walking the perimeter to try and show him that a man is also staying here. I'm a 24-year-old female, by the way, if you were wondering. Then Steve, wearing the same dirty outfit and hat, while holding a 24 case of Budweiser, is standing at the end of the driveway again. I'm watching him from the front window, and I see my dad at the other end of the yard as he comes into view, and Steve turns around and walks back to his house. I later learned that Steve had been to jail multiple times due to domestic abuse. His kids are not allowed to see him due to his violent nature, and he bought a 4-wheeler. No one knows how he gets his money to these things. Terry and John have never seen him leave for work. They've only seen him leave on his moped for 4-wheelers empty-handed for an hour or 2, and then return with a load of beers a while later. I don't know who he thought I was, but every time he looked at the house in my direction, there was just pure malice in his eyes. Who knows what would have happened if I hadn't have called the cops as early as I did. When dog sitting from now on, if a neighbor says, "Hi," my answer is, "Let's not meet." I've had run-ins with cougars at an old farmhouse we lived at for a while. You could always tell because the nightlife would go silent, the bats would vanish, the foxes would go silent, even the tree frogs and crickets would be quiet. It started with nearby cows going out. Then it was like a blob of audible darkness as everything hid from the big cat. Now here's a creepier story. The same thing happens when a big feral hog is wandering solo at night. Same place. We let our dogs run loose at the night for exercise. Sometimes they came home with a raccoon or armadillo. This one particular night, they came home hauling full tilt boogie on the back porch. My dogs fear nothing because they're dumb. So when they run from something, I step inside for a handgun. I know it's bad, and I head inside for protection. The dogs were emboldened. So with my wife behind me and our dogs scouting ahead, where the dogs are barking like they see something, it was the opposite. It was stuck under the chain link fence. Pig squash. It was the size of a bass boat. I grunted, and my old dog took off the porch. I told my wife to head for the house, and I would be there soon. The hog had uprooted the concrete set posts. It was looking at me, and I was looking at Ham. I backed away, and one step at a time, if I tripped, he would have eaten me, like I eat Ham. When I got to the porch, my wife had my weapon ready, and I told her to keep it for when I was MIA. I know what you're thinking, and you're right. Nothing happened because the pig was long gone. The next day I went to try and estimate the damage to the fence, but the only sign of the hog was a bunch of bristle and a trashed fence. My parents had a business running cabins in the middle of nowhere. People would rent them out for a small amount of time and then leave. It was their job to make sure that they were cleaned and ready for the next people, to market them and have people come and stay every once in a while. It was quite far to the nearest town, at least a 40-minute drive every day to and from school and for groceries and the like, but my parents loved being out there. I was an only child at the time, as they simply were far too busy with their business to even entertain the possibility of giving me a sibling, which now in later years I can respect, having a child of my own. It was here, out in the middle of nowhere, where my love for nature grew. There were so many interesting things to see, and my parents, being far too busy to pay me the attention I needed to as a growing child, let me wander off by myself, with only a handful of rules to adhere to. Don't be back too late, which was never specific but usually meant before sundown, to make sure I was there for dinner, amongst a few other smaller things. There was a part of the forest that I absolutely loved going to. It was a trail that I had made myself, worn it down with my own footfalls, and I tried to keep it as hidden as possible. It was my own private slice of heaven, my tranquility, my peace, and although my parents knew about it, they hardly ever went there, unless, perhaps, they needed to find me urgently. It was on one of these days where I made my way down the trail. I had started to build myself a little den from sticks. It was quite hard to find the appropriate sticks, and at 12 years old I wasn't a master builder. But I did enjoy trying to gather up whatever I could to make a wannabe shelter, just so that I could read my books or listen to music in peace, or perhaps just listen to the sounds of nature, look around and watch the animals undisturbed. It was on a day like this, the middle of summer and prime time for rentals, that I was just chilling on my lawn chair in my den in the middle of nowhere. That's when I hear rustling up on my trail. I look around and see a man, fat, bearded, very, very tall, stumble his way through the trail. He let out a sharp cry of pain as he pricked himself on one of the brambles coming through. You see, my path was ideal for someone of my height and stature, but for a taller person there are parts that were a little bit uncomfortable. As he approached me, he asked me what I was doing there. He had a tone in his voice that almost made him sound like he was the owner of these woods, and as I didn't know if it was just national property, or if it did indeed have an owner, I started to get scared. What if I wasn't allowed here anymore? I asked him who he was, and he said that he indeed did own this part of the forest. He looked at me up and down and asked what I was doing there. I told him that I was sorry and that I just liked coming here. I didn't want him to think that I was doing anything bad like building a den on his property. So when he looked down at the bundle of sticks, he asked what I was trying to do, and I told him that I was trying to build a little den. He laughed, and the conversation got a bit more lighthearted. He said that when he was younger he also liked building dens out in the forest. I asked if I could keep trying to build mine, and he gave me a little nod and said it would be okay. That's when things got a bit creepy. He put a condition. He said, "How about you let me play with you now, and then you can keep coming back to your den. No problem, no questions asked." I didn't really understand what he meant. I assumed just play together building the den, so I shyly nodded, but I was getting very scared. Part of me just wanted to bolt and run, but I wanted to keep coming here, and I was torn. I look up into his eyes, and I'll never forget. There was a hungry look in them, almost predator-like, like I was his prey and he was tracking me down, ready to devour me. All of a sudden, a surge of fear shot through me. He said, getting closer towards me, that he really enjoyed playing with little girls. At that moment, my heart stopped beating, and I knew I needed to leave. I bolted without another word, abandoning my lawn chair and a handful of other things I had littered about, and just ran for it. It took me about 7 minutes to get back home, which was a lot faster than the usual 14-15 minutes it took to get there in the first place. I arrived through the door, panting and babbling to my mum. She calmed me down after about 10 minutes, and I finally asked her if the forest belonged to someone. She said that the forest was part of the cabin site, and that anyone could go through there as it was owned by my parents and came as part of the business. I was relieved, and then said, "So who's the man who said he owned the woods?" She gave me a confused look and asked me what he looked like. I described him in great detail, down to the dirty green plaid shirt he was wearing. That's when my mother got a very strange look on her face and walked away, telling me, "I'll be right back, honey, just wait here, okay?" She went to get my dad, who was cleaning one of the other properties, preparing it for rentals later in the day. They had a conversation and came back. My dad asked me to confirm if it was indeed the guy who I was telling her about, and I said it was. They looked at each other and told me not to worry about it, smiled, and that was the end of that. I never saw the man again, and I was very grateful for that. But part of me always wondered who he was. Sadly, I was too scared to go back into the forest for about 2 years, and after that, I finally made my way through again. I had to make my trail once more, and as I was getting older, my interest started to dwindle being outside, and I began focusing more on hanging out with my friends. But I still used it every now and again, just to chill, or maybe to go there with my buddies. However, this story does have a resolution. It wasn't until years later, where the spot had finally become a nice little chill place for when my friends were around, that we were all telling each other scary stories. My best friend, Ashley, was telling me about something spooky that had happened to her, and that's when, being at the exact spot where it had all occurred about 8 years ago, do I tell her and the rest of my friends my story with the creep right where they're sitting. They all look aghast and ask what he looked like. I give them a brief description, and one of them says, "Could it really be?" and then cuts off. She says she doesn't remember his name, but later that evening goes back to her house and gets on the internet and shows me a picture the next day. This was when cell phones were just coming out, and sending picture messages had to be done through text and cost a fair amount of money on your phone operator back then. When the picture comes through, I can confirm it was indeed the man. She'd been doing some research online, and it turns out that he was a predator who stalked our area and neighboring towns a number of years ago. He was convicted after he was found guilty of doing something terrible with a young child, and after that was sent to prison. I can't believe how close I was, how in danger I was that one time. In any case, I'd rather not meet him again. I was hanging out with a guy once in my small rural town. One of the only things to do in this town are to listen to music, drive around old country roads, and eventually find a quiet spot where you can park and chat. We call this road riding, and everyone does it. We were driving down a one-lane road when we turned into some gravel road. The gravel eventually gave way to dirt, until the dirt was just 2 tire tracks winding down the wood ahead of us. I asked him if he knew where he was going, and he assured me that he's been going to this spot for years. He was a really creative guy, always writing songs, recording whatever projects were on his hand. Anyway, we were sitting in his car, just having a good time. And we reach the middle of this clearing. At this point, you can't even see semblance of a road. We were truly in the middle of nowhere. Once we park, he turns down the music and gets to talking. What started out as talking about life and love eventually turned into discussing higher powers and enlightenment. There's more, but it's been almost a year now, and I honestly can't recall the entire conversation. He was talking about how limited most people are in their thinking, and how he thinks there's so much more out there than what we've come across. Bear in mind it was about 1 or 2 a.m. at this point, pitch black outside, and we had turned off all the headlights, and the only light was coming from the dimly lit radio softly playing in the background. As he's talking, I start to feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up for no reason. I wasn't particularly creeped out by what he was talking about, and found it rather interesting. The air started to feel heavy, and my body became incredibly aware that we were not alone. Something was sharing that clearing with us. The atmosphere around us felt electric, like something was manifesting itself. It was just a totally unnatural feeling that I've never experienced before. I felt the area succumb to overwhelming malice. About 30 seconds after I feel this way, he stops, looks at me and says, "Can you feel that?" I can't even speak, so I just nod. The moment I nod, the entire clearing is lit up with a bright light. It wasn't a flashlight, like a lightning bolt. It was lit for a good 5 seconds before fading out, and it was steady. We stare at each other in panic, and I finally shout to him, "Get out of here." He fiddles with the ignition to drive away, and the whole time I just feel impending doom. I've never felt more like I was going to perish than at that moment, and there wasn't even a visible threat. I've dealt with anxiety my entire life, so I know what it's like to feel unnecessarily helpless all the time. My fight or flight reflexes go off on all cylinders randomly through the day. This was worse. This was the scariest moment of my life. I went from being totally happy that I was sitting in a car with this super good-looking dude and fighting back sobs of terror. We made it out, and once we got to the main road, all he could say to me was, "What was that?" And my response was shake head paired with, "I dunno." He dropped me off and we never spoke about it again. This is the first time I've brought it up since then, and I legitimately feel terrified and clam up every time I start to tell someone about it. I feel like whatever was in that clearing with us did not want us there. It did not want to talk to us about what we were doing, and it was giving us a warning. I should also mention that the radio turned off with the flash of a light, and we tried to drive away, and the car acted like the battery was dead for a moment before finally deciding to turn over. We hadn't been there long, so there's no way the car died as we're talking, and it seems super coincidental that it would just do that the moment the lights filled the clearing. This was a brand new car. I staffed a summer camp for 5 years now. A long-standing tradition is that some of the senior staffers regularly sneak out during the night and drive into town to hang out and generally be hooligans. Me and 4 other guys pushed a car around the bend from the parking lot to avoid waking up the adults, then hopped inside and headed down towards the town. After a few hours of jokes, Baja blasts from Taco Bell, and teaching one of our goons how to drive in an empty parking lot, we're driving down the country roads, joking around and listening to music. That is until we turn down a random road and something immediately feels off. It's about 3:30 a.m. and we start down a hill, and suddenly the road goes from asphalt to gravel to dirt. We then notice a rusted boat trailer on its side, a bunch of old tools, rotting piles of wood, and a general mess. That's when we reach the bottom of the hill. There's a big shed with a garage door that's wide open, and another shed seemingly made out of plywood with a door creaked open. There's a light shining through the crack of the door faintly, flickering, and a fuse box right outside the door. The mood of the car changed in an instant. For a moment we all sat in silence watching the lights flicker. No one said anything, but we could all tell something didn't feel right. Eventually, to ease the tension that we're all feeling, we start to joke, as teenage boys do, jeering at one of our friends to turn off the light or open the door, when suddenly the door creaks open. The next few moments are a blur, but I can assure you that was the fastest an early 2000s Toyota Camry has ever booked it up a dirt road. All 5 of us stayed just about silent during the 15-minute drive back to camp. Something about the aura of the place felt off. To this day, when I imagine sitting in the front seat of that car, I get an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Was someone behind the door? Why were they there at 3:30 in the morning? This happened fairly recently. My boyfriend and I were spending a night camping, just to get away from it all. We had got comfortable in our tents and had gotten to sleep. It must have been about 4 a.m. or so, and I was awoken by rustling near our tent. There aren't many big animals where we live, so I was unsure what exactly it could be. Being the curious gal I am, I glanced at my watch and knew that it had to be an animal. I didn't want it getting too close, so I thought I'd sneak my head out, as I knew there was nothing dangerous in this area, just to maybe frighten it away, in case it wanted to try and nibble on our tent. So I stand up, make my way out the tent, and look around. There's nothing. But I listen intently in the dark, and then I hear it again. A little animal getting closer and closer. The footfalls are more pronounced, and as I look behind our tent to see where it's coming from, I hear it run off into the distance. I was quite happy with that, thinking whatever it was must have seen me and gotten scared. So I pull back the flap, do the zipper back up, and make my way back to my sleeping bag next to my snoring boyfriend, who hadn't even noticed that I'd gotten up to scare that animal away. I try going back to sleep, but there's an uneasiness in the air now, and I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. Part of me is trying to convince myself it's simply just the material, and that I don't feel super comfortable sleeping like a sardine. But deep down I know it isn't true. That encounter, despite the fact nothing happened, has unsettled me ever so slightly, and I feel that there's just something wrong. Unable to sleep, it being nearly 5 a.m. now, knowing that the light will be up soon, I decide that I'm just gonna sit out in the dark and listen, to scare away anything that comes near, and hopefully, by the time it's light, I feel safe enough to go back to sleep, as my boyfriend is a heavy sleeper and I know that he'll be asleep till late also. So, there I sit, waiting for the first rays of light to give me comfort in the morning. But then the rustling returns. The footfalls come back, this time more rushed. I look around and still can't see anything. And when I hear nothing for about 5 minutes, do I finally think it's gone. But that's when I hear it. It's not right beside my tent, it's right behind me now. I quickly turn my head in a super fast way and see a man on all fours wearing dirty clothes. He almost looks like a rat. He gives me this creepy smile, stands on his legs, and in an instant is running off into the woods. He hides behind a tree and starts peeking out like I hadn't noticed him, almost like this is a game. I just about soil myself, and I immediately yell, "Martin!" to get my boyfriend's attention. He didn't wake up, so I keep on screaming. Ratman is just there, in his rags, staring at me hungrily from behind the tree. I wanted this creep to know that I was with someone, and that if he did anything, there would be hell to pay. That's when I hear a very groggy, "What?" from my tent, and I'm getting a bit angry now. I really need his assistance, so I yell at him to come here now and that there's a strange man outside. The words seem to perk him up as he dashes outside. What I hadn't realized is that my boyfriend likes to sleep in the nude, and then there's him naked with Ratman staring from behind a tree. Not that my boyfriend seemed to notice, he was far too focused on this creep. When I point in the direction of the strange man, my boyfriend is still adjusting his eyes and can't see him yet as it's still very dark, the moon only partially illuminating where we're at. He rubs his eyes and then we hear him run again. I've lost track of him. My boyfriend is now angry, starts screaming to come here and face us like men. And then, at that moment, the Ratman comes running towards my boyfriend with a stick. My boyfriend just manages to avoid being smashed in the head, and the Ratman somehow trips. My boyfriend takes the opportunity to pin him down, punches him in the face a few times, and asks him what the hell he's doing trying to scare us in the middle of the night. The Ratman doesn't say anything, just spits in my boyfriend's face. My boyfriend, in a fury, stands up, kicks him and tells him to leave, and that if he ever comes anywhere near our clearing, there'd be hell to pay. The creep slowly walked away into the distance, looking back and swearing. None of us have any idea what he was doing out here in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. We were too afraid at this point to do anything else, so we pack up our stuff and leave just as the first rays of sunshine are making their way through the dark. To this day, I still don't like camping. And Ratman, wherever you are, let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories from the middle of nowhere. Some creepy things are certainly bound to happen if you make your way there. If you like the video, please don't forget to let me know down below. You know what to do. Like I said, we're nearly at the target. Thank you everyone who's gone over there to follow me so far. I think I'll run another one of these for us to get to 4,000 when we hit 3,000, and I'll offer more prizes as well. I'm really trying to grow my presence on social media. Not for vanity, it is important. You'll see why soon. The project is going swimmingly. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done just so that I can present it to you guys soon. But it would really mean a lot to me if you would follow me in either of those two places. Alright then guys, well, for now it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.